The content of a film is half given to an audience through a screenplay. The other half is audiovisual. For example, the shape of the bomb, I wanted it to remind you of a fertility goddess. You know, sort of, it's the biggest bomb ever made. Because it's not the real bomb, it's the bomb the way the kids look at it for me. And I wanted the bomb to be like a pagan sculpture of a mother made in metal, you know, so it becomes a character. All these things and many, many more are layered in the movie in a way that I hopefully present them to the audience in a way they can absorb them, but they don't need to process them. I loved very much a Spanish comic book called Paracuellos, which is a comic book about an orphanage of kids during the fascist years. This is created by an artist called Carlos Jimenez. And Carlos Jimenez, in my opinion, is one of the top 3 European artists in the comic book medium of all times. As a huge fan, I said, would you design the look of some characters to use as a springboard to discuss with the wardrobe designer? Of course, the look that we ended up with was very different, but it was a great springboard. And all these kids Carlos draws are the quintessential Spanish kid. You see a kid in Spain, he looks like a Jimenez kid. There's this kid called the Owl, the Búho, who looks exactly like a Carlos Jimenez drawing. Exactly. He's a guy that in the pre-production of Devil's Backbone was incredibly useful, not only as an artist, but as a living memory. Because he wrote all those comics about the orphanage from his memories. He was in an orphanage during the fascist years. He was left there by his family who couldn't pay for his sustenance. And everything in those albums are things that happened to him. Like the idea of creating a marble out of snot and mud, that came from talking to him. What they would use instead of coffee, what they would use to substitute the meals. With Carlos, we started designing the sets a little bit because he has a great attention to detail. We did inspirational drawings of the sets, what they could look like. And I started doing my doodle, my thumbnail. And then Carlos would grab that thumbnail and translate it into a beautiful drawing. And then that drawing was followed by everybody, the designers, the visual effects artists. If you see the transition from my doodle to his drawing to the finished frame is pretty accurate. What we did with Carlos was to draw in the abstract. We started designing the sets. We started conceptualizing the orphanage. Cesar Macarron, the production designer, would work from Carlos's drawing to reality. We shot half in a set, half in a real building. I wanted very much to create the feeling that Santi and the kids were also like the fetuses in the jars. They were encapsulated. So we created arches throughout the orphanage that were not there. Devil's Backbone is done in 2 color spaces. One is the daylight, which is the amber, and talks about the liquid in the jars, which is amber too, and the liquid in the pool, which is amber. And the other one is at night, when the ghosts become loose. That is in cyan. And the tiles are in cyan. Certain details of the architecture are in cyan or greenish. And that is creating its own language. We created a story of what was this place. It was a factory of mosaic during Roman times. So we layered the orphanage in 3 layers. The subconscious of the orphanage, which is the very bottom, the pool, was a pool that was used during Roman times to process tile. And it had acid. That's why the rust is there and all that. Then the second layer, they built an old kitchen on top of that. And then on top of that kitchen, in the 1800s, they built the rest of the building. And we rationalized all this, what Casares' study would look like, what the classroom would look like. If a production designer is good, they understand as much about the art as about the need of moving a wall. Guillermo Navarro has a saying. He says to the production designer, when a wall doesn't move, you should sell tickets for people to come and see your set because we're not going to be able to shoot it.
Y eso supuesto, más fácil será, más...
But if you make all the walls mobile and you make everything accommodating to the camera, then it's a great association.
Que no que en ella yo mande. No impedir el grito siempre.
With Jose Vico, he is one of the best wardrobe designers I work with. He did a superb job with the wardrobe of each of the characters, telling you exactly who they are. Casares, his character, comes through his wardrobe. I insisted on the pig to have urine stains in his pants and acid sweat on under his armpits. He really made the fabric look old and used and beautifully lived in. He chose the right pattern for Conchita to be simple but readable, but not overwhelming. The key is to understand that a close-up needs to be architecturally conceived in the same way you conceive a master shot. The face is a set. When you build a wardrobe, it's very important to know this part of the wardrobe, what is it showing? If you make it too busy or not busy enough, or the information doesn't allow for a good framing, you can ruin the close-up of a character. When you design a wardrobe, you go wide, medium, and close. And you know where those lines in the design of the wardrobe should start and end. And Jose understood all this. And he worked very well with DDT. We needed a lot of help with Carmen's leg, which I had a desire to do since Kronos. Claudio Brook in Kronos was meant to have that wooden leg, and I couldn't afford it. We couldn't do it. DDT designed one of the most beautiful legs I've ever seen. If you actually remove the shoe from the leg, if you can see the silver foot. And what I wanted was a leg that spoke of somebody that had money, like somebody that had a leg made that was a beautiful object. I wanted it to look like the foot of a saint and like a reliquary. In the Middle Ages, for a reliquary of a hand, they would do a silver hand, beautifully crafted. And in the middle of the hand, there would be bones of the hand of Saint Adolphus. You know, there would be little things. And I wanted the leg to feel like a reliquary. I wanted the leg to evoke that feeling of holding the memories of Carmen when she could run. I wanted it to also have that secret door, which is where she puts the gold, and to represent Carmen. This movie has such attention to detail. With Cesar, with Macaron, we would choose exactly the objects we wanted. The books, the shelves are all period. We bought them from old schools that were being demolished. The comic books, the suitcase, the right needle, the giant scissors in the kitchen. Every single object was put on my desk, and I would choose all of them. We did the drawings of Jaime the right way. They are creepy, but they look like they were done by a kid. The diagram of the guys killing the mammoth is really, really accurate to the type of illustration. So there was nothing left to chance in this movie. We built all the photographs of Jacinto from hundreds of photographs that we bought, and we went through all of them, and we photoshopped little pieces, and we built those images. And it was very important for me to get that image of the two people in the balcony, and the kid had moved, and his childhood is a blur. His childhood is a ghost. And he says, that's me. Doesn't look like me because I moved, that's why I'm blurry. No, it's because he has no sense of the past. He has no sense of who he is. And I wanted him to not have a room that looks homey, but is cluttered. It's sort of like his mind. That nothing in that shack belongs to him. They're all things that he does, but nothing that he owns. So Jacinto, for me, was very important that he was a guy that had no sense of belonging, which I think is extremely important for him to be so capable of killing. The DDT work was technically very challenging with Jacinto because I needed an injury that people would go. So it's not a big injury, but it really is very painful. And I thought the armpit would be really, really painful for people. The first lance goes in, you can really see it perforate the armpit, and it's Second one was in the forearm, so they needed to cast the whole torso with Noriega, and Eduardo went to Barcelona and they put him in this contraption, which looks like a Jules Verne diving bell, and cast him in the right pose that would then become a rod puppet made of silicone that the lance would perforate over and over again, and you would get that effect. And then we used lances without the tip, and we added the tip digitally, and we used every trick in the book to do that sequence. To work with Jose, with Macaron, with DDT, with Navarro, with Javier Navarrete in the music, with Salva Mayolas in the sound design. All these are incredibly important partnerships. And of course, the most important partnership was with Pedro, Agustin, Esther, the entire staff of El Deseo, who took this movie and loved it as much as we did.